The sleek black Mercedes slowed to a stop beside Robert Jenkins' weathered pickup truck. As the tinted window rolled down, revealing a woman in designer sunglasses, Robert had no idea this chance encounter would save his family's farm. 1 week later, when the same woman returned with a contract worth millions, Robert's hands trembled as he realized what was happening. "I never forgot how you took the time to help a stranger," she said, sliding the papers across his kitchen table. "Now I want to help you." His life was about to change forever. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The summer sun beat down on Robert Jenkins' weathered face as he knelt in the soil of his family farm. His calloused hands worked methodically, checking the tomato plants that stretched across 3 acres of his struggling 50-acre property. At 42, the lines around his eyes had deepened, not just from squinting in the sun, but from years of worry. The drought had been merciless this season, and the bank notices were piling up on his kitchen table back at the farmhouse. The Jenkins farm had been in his family for 4 generations, but Robert feared he might be the one to lose it. The massive grocery chains had been squeezing small farmers like him for years, demanding lower prices while their own profits soared. He couldn't compete with the industrial farms that supplied them, and the local farmers' markets weren't enough to keep his operation afloat. Robert wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leading a streak of dirt across his forehead. His wife Sarah had taken a second job in town to help make ends meet, working evenings at the local diner after spending her days helping on the farm. Their 17-year-old daughter Lily was talking about skipping college to work full-time, something that broke Robert's heart. He'd always promised her education would be her ticket to whatever future she wanted, farm life or otherwise. The distant sound of an engine drew his attention away from the tomatoes. A vehicle he didn't recognize was approaching slowly down the dirt road that ran alongside his property. It wasn't unusual for people to get lost out here. The GPS systems often directed travelers down these country roads as shortcuts, only for them to find themselves surrounded by farmland with poor cell, calf reception. Robert stood up, brushing soil from his knees, as he walked toward the fence line. The vehicle, a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows that looked wildly out of place in rural Pennsylvania, came to a stop. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a woman wearing dark sunglasses and a crisp white blouse. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and even from a distance, Robert could tell her jewelry was expensive. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying the polished accent of someone who'd spent time in the Northeast's elite universities. "I'm afraid I'm a bit turned around. My GPS keeps recalculating, and I haven't had service for the last 20 minutes. Robert nodded sympathetically and approached the car. "Happens all the time out here. Where are you trying to get to? The Oak Ridge Conference Center? I'm told it's somewhere in this area." She removed her sunglasses, revealing intelligent brown eyes that assessed him quickly. "You're about 15 miles off track," Robert explained, leaning slightly on the fence post. "Those GPS systems always try to route folks through here, but the bridge they're counting on has been out for 2 years now." The woman sighed, checking her watch. "I have a meeting in an hour. Is there any way to get there from here without backtracking all the way to the highway?" Robert glanced at his truck, considering offering to lead her part of the way, but he couldn't afford to burn the gas. Instead, he gestured for her to pull over. "If you've got a minute, I can draw you a map. There's a back way that'll get you there faster than going back to the main road." The woman seemed to hesitate for a moment, then nodded and pulled her car to the side of the dirt road. She stepped out, and Robert noticed her impractical footwear designer heels that immediately sank slightly into the soft ground of the roadside. She was younger than he'd initially thought, probably in her mid-30s, with a confidence that suggested she was used to being in charge. "I'm Robert Jenkins," he said, extending a hand before realizing it was covered in soil. He pulled it back with an apologetic smile. "Alexandra Pierce," she replied, seemingly unbothered by his dirty hands. "Everyone calls me Alex." Robert nodded and knelt down, smoothing a patch of dirt by the roadside. He picked up a stick and began to draw a crude map. "We're here," he said, making an X. "The conference center is over here." He drew another mark. "The problem is, there's a creek between here and there, and the bridge is out." He drew a wavy line to represent the creek. Alex crouched down beside him, careful to keep her cream-colored slacks from touching the ground, watching intently as he sketched. Now, if you go back this way about 3 miles, Robert continued, drawing a line, there's a junction. Most folks would tell you to turn right to get back to the highway. But if you go left instead and follow that road for about 4 miles, you'll come to an old covered bridge. It doesn't look like much, but it's sturdy. Cross that, then take your second right, and that'll put you on Maple Road, which runs straight to the conference center. He glanced up at her to see if she was following his directions. Alex was studying the dirt map with surprising focus. Left at the junction, 4 miles to the covered bridge, second right onto Maple Road, she repeated. Robert nodded, impressed by her quick grasp of the directions. That's right. Should get you there in about 30 minutes, traffic willing. And this bridge is safe? It doesn't look on my map at all. Robert smiled. Been there since my grandfather's time. Local secret. The county keeps it maintained because some of the farming equipment needs to cross there, but they never bothered to update the maps. Too many tourists would use it as a shortcut if they knew. Alex stood up, brushing her hands together lightly. Well, thank you for sharing your local secret with me, Mr. Jenkins. Just Robert, he said, standing as well. And it's no problem. Wouldn't want you to be late for your meeting. She reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet. I appreciate your help. Please, let me. Robert waved his hand dismissively. No need for that. Just being neighborly. Something in Alex's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise that was quickly replaced by a smile. That's very kind of you. She put her wallet away and extended her hand. Thank you, Robert. This time he accepted the handshake, despite his dirty palm. Her grip was firm and confident. Good luck with your meeting, he said, as she returned to her car. Alex paused with her hand on the door handle. Your farm, she said, glancing at the fields around them. What do you grow here? The question took Robert by surprise. Most lost travelers didn't take much interest in his struggling operation. Bit of everything, he answered. Tomatoes, sweet corn, bell peppers, zucchini, strawberries, some apple trees on the north end. We've been trying to focus more on specialty varieties, heirloom tomatoes, purple carrots, things you don't see in the big supermarkets. Alex nodded, her eyes scanning the fields with what seemed like genuine interest. And how's business? Robert hesitated. There was something in her tone, not quite pity, but perhaps a kind of professional curiosity. Challenging, he admitted finally. But we get by. She nodded again, as if confirming something to herself. Well, thank you again for the directions. I hope your growing season improves. With that, she got into her car and drove away, following the path he'd outlined in the dirt. Robert watched until the Mercedes disappeared around a bend, then turned back to his tomato plants. The encounter was already fading from his mind as he focused on the immediate problems at hand. The irrigation system needed repairs he couldn't afford, and a section of fence on the western edge was failing. Just another day of keeping his head above water, not knowing that the wake of that black Mercedes would soon return to change everything. Alexandra Pierce merged onto the highway, finally back in cell service range, and immediately tapped the button on her steering wheel to activate her car's phone system. Call Marcus, she commanded. After 2 rings, her executive assistant answered. Alex, we were getting worried. The board is already gathering. I got lost, she explained, accelerating past a slow-moving truck. The GPS sent me down some country roads with no service. I'm about 25 minutes out. I'll let them know. Do you need me to push back the start time? Alex checked the clock on her dashboard. No, I'll make it. Just had my presentation ready to go the moment I walk in. Already done. Anything else? Alex hesitated, thinking about the farmer who had just drawn her a map in the dirt rather than asking for payment or just giving vague directions like most people would. Yes, actually. When you get a chance, I want you to look into a farm in Lancaster County. Jenkins Farm, owned by Robert Jenkins. Research for the local sourcing initiative? Marcus asked, the sound of his typing already audible in the background. Potentially, Alex replied, remembering the tired lines around the farmer's eyes, the careful way he'd spoken about his crops. See what you can find about their operation, financial situation, crop quality, any reviews. From farmers markets. The usual preliminary assessment. I'll have it on your desk by tomorrow morning. Perfect. See you soon. Alex ended the call and focused on the road, her mind already shifting to the board meeting ahead. As CEO of Freshmark Grocers, the chain with over 500 stores across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, she was about to propose a major shift in their sourcing strategy, one that would either revolutionize their business model or become an expensive failure. The Rural Revival Initiative was her brainchild, a plan to partner directly with small and medium-sized farms to create exclusive supply chains for Freshmark stores. It would cut out multiple middlemen, potentially lowering costs while ensuring fresher produce reached their shelves. More importantly to Alex, it would support the kind of family farms that were rapidly disappearing across America, squeezed out by industrial agriculture and the very pricing pressures companies like hers had created. She'd grown up on a small dairy farm in Vermont, watching her parents work from dawn until dusk, only to lose everything when the local processing plant closed and the major grocery chains refused to pay prices that would keep small operations viable. Her father had taken a factory job, and her mother had cleaned houses to put Alex through college. She'd never forgotten the humiliation in her father's eyes when he'd had to sell his herd, or the way her mother's hands had grown rough from cleaning chemicals. Alex had sworn then that she would find a way to change the system. Her rise through the corporate world had been meteoric. Harvard Business School, management consulting, then a series of increasingly senior roles at Freshmark before being named CEO at 34, the youngest in the company's history and one of the few women leading a major grocery chain. Now, 3 years into her tenure, she finally had the political capital within the company to push for meaningful change. The Rural Revival Initiative was risky. Wall Street analysts would question the efficiency compared to their current centralized purchasing model, but Alex was convinced it could work. And meeting Robert Jenkins today, seeing his weathered face and hearing the careful pride in his voice when he spoke about his heirloom varieties, had only strengthened her resolve. As she pulled into the conference center parking lot, Alex pushed thoughts of the farmer aside. She had a board to convince, and that would require all her focus. But she made a mental note to pay special attention to Marcus's report on Jenkins' farm. There was something about that place, about the man who'd taken the time to draw a map in the dirt for a stranger, that had resonated with her. Little did she know, that resonance would soon become the catalyst for changes neither she nor Robert Jenkins could have imagined. A week passed, and Robert had all but forgotten about the lost traveler in the Mercedes. Life on the farm continued its relentless rhythm. Early mornings, long days, and nights spent at the kitchen table with Sarah, going over their finances with increasing desperation. The letter from Eastern Regional Bank had arrived yesterday, giving them 30 days to make good on their late mortgage payments or face foreclosure proceedings. Robert had hidden it from Sarah, not wanting to add to her burdens when she was already working herself to exhaustion between the farm and the diner. He was in the barn, attempting to repair their ancient tractor for what felt like the 100th time, when he heard the sound of tires on gravel. Customers rarely came directly to the farm these days. Most of their sales happened at the weekend farmers market in town or through a small CSA program Sarah had organized with some local families. Wiping his hands on a rag, Robert stepped out of the barn to see a familiar black Mercedes parked in front of the farmhouse. The woman from last week, Alexandra, he remembered, was standing beside it, this time dressed more casually in dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt, though her watch and earrings still screamed money. She wasn't alone. A tall black man in a tailored suit stood beside her, holding a leather portfolio. They appeared to be in conversation with Sarah, who had been weeding the herb garden near the house. Robert approached, curiosity and a vague sense of unease mingling in his stomach. "Hello again?" he called as he drew near. "Did you get lost a second time?" Alexandra turned, a smile brightening her face. "Robert, no, not lost this time. I found my way here quite deliberately." She extended her hand, and this time Robert made sure his was relatively clean before shaking it. I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit." "Not at all," he said, though his confusion was growing. "I'm just surprised you remembered the place." "I have an excellent memory," she replied. "And your directions last week were perfect, got me to my meeting with time to spare." She gestured to the man beside her. "This is Marcus Wright, my executive assistant." Marcus nodded politely and extended his hand. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Jenkins." "Just Robert is fine," he said automatically, shaking the man's hand while trying to process why an executive and her assistant would make a special trip to his farm. Sarah stepped forward, wiping her hands on her gardening apron. Unlike Robert, she had immediately recognized their visitor's name when introductions were made. "Mr. Jenkins?" she said, emphasizing his surname with a significant look. "Ms. Pierce was just explaining that she's the CEO of Freshmark Grocers." Robert blinked, the information taking a moment to sink in. Freshmark was one of the largest grocery chains in the region, with stores in every major city and many smaller towns, including their own. "The CEO?" he repeated, looking at Alexandra with new eyes. She nodded, seeming slightly amused by his surprise. "Please, call me Alex. And yes, I've been CEO for about 3 years now." Robert's mind was racing. Why would the CEO of a major grocery chain visit his small, struggling farm? Had she really been lost last week, or had that been some kind of undercover assessment? And why bring her assistant now? As if reading his thoughts, Alex said, "I'm sure you're wondering why I'm here. The truth is, after you helped me last week, I became curious about your farm. You mentioned focusing on specialty varieties, which aligned with a project I've been developing at Freshmark. I asked Marcus to put together some information on Jenkins's farm." Marcus opened his portfolio and handed Robert a neatly printed document. "We've compiled an overview of your operation based on public records, market presence, and customer reviews from local farmers markets. I hope you don't find it intrusive." Robert took the document, stunned. The first page included aerial photos of his farm, data on his crop varieties, and even excerpts from social media posts where customers had praised his produce. Sarah leaned in to look over his shoulder, her expression a mixture of surprise and wariness. "This is..." Robert began, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Thorough," Sarah supplied, her tone careful. Alex nodded. "Thoroughness is a professional habit, but I'm not here to make you uncomfortable. I'm here because I have a proposition that might interest you both." She gestured toward their farmhouse. "Could we sit down and discuss it? I promise it won't take much of your time." Robert and Sarah exchanged glances, having one of those silent conversations that couples develop over years of partnership. Sarah gave a small nod, and Robert turned back to their unexpected visitors. "Of course," he said. "Come on up to the house. I can put on some coffee." "That would be lovely," Alex replied. As they walked toward the farmhouse, Robert became acutely aware of its shabbiness, the peeling paint, the sagging porch step, the mismatched furniture visible through the screen door. It wasn't that they didn't take pride in their home. They simply couldn't afford the upkeep alongside the farm's more pressing needs. If Alex noticed these details, she gave no sign. Instead, she commented on the herb garden Sarah had been tending, asking knowledgeable questions about the varieties they grew and how they were used. By the time they reached the porch, Sarah's initial wariness had softened somewhat, though Robert could tell she was still on guard. Inside, Robert hastily cleared the kitchen table of mail and farm paperwork while Sarah prepared coffee. Alex and Marcus sat down, seeming perfectly at ease despite the humble surroundings. "Your property is beautiful," Alex said, as Sarah set mugs of coffee before them. "How long has it been in your family?" "Since 1923, Robert answered, taking a seat across from her. "My great-grandfather started with just 10 acres, growing mostly corn and keeping a few dairy cows. Each generation expanded a bit, trying new crops, adapting to the changing markets. Until the markets stopped adapting to us," Sarah added quietly, sitting beside her husband. Alex nodded, her expression sympathetic. "The consolidation of food distribution has been brutal for small farmers. It's one of the issues I've been trying to address at Freshmark." Robert took a sip of his coffee, still trying to make sense of this surreal situation. "With all due respect, Ms. Pierce, Alex, Please, Alex, he corrected. Companies like yours are part of the reason farms like ours are struggling. The pricing pressure, the standardization requirements, the preference for dealing with massive producers who can guarantee uniform product year-round. Instead of becoming defensive, Alex nodded again. You're absolutely right. The traditional supermarket model has contributed significantly to the decline of family farms. It's precisely why I'm here today. She turned to Marcus, who withdrew a sleek tablet from his portfolio and placed it on the table. I'd like to tell you about a new initiative we're launching at Freshmark, Alex continued, tapping the tablet to bring up a presentation. We're calling it the Rural Revival Initiative. For the next 20 minutes, Robert and Sarah listened in growing astonishment as Alex outlined her plan. Freshmark was going to establish direct partnerships with a select group of small and medium-sized farms throughout their operating region. These farms would receive guaranteed purchase contracts at fair prices, technical and financial support for sustainable farming practices, and exclusive branding within Freshmark stores. The goal, Alex explained, showing them slides of projected numbers, is to create a network of local suppliers who can provide our customers with fresher, more diverse produce while ensuring the farms themselves remain economically viable. No middlemen taking their cut. No pressure to standardize everything into the same bland varieties that ship well, that taste like nothing. And you're considering our farm for this program? Sarah asked, the skepticism clear in her voice. I am, Alex confirmed. Based on our research, Jenkins Farm has an excellent reputation for quality, particularly with your heirloom varieties. You're already practicing many of the sustainable farming methods we want to promote, and you're within the optimal distance from 3 of our distribution centers. Robert leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. This sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? Alex smiled slightly. A healthy dose of skepticism is appropriate. The catch, as you put it, is that we would require certain commitments from participating farms. Consistent quality standards, adherence to our sustainability guidelines, some flexibility in crop planning to meet our needs, and exclusivity you wouldn't be able to sell to other major retail chains, though farmers markets and local sales would still be permitted. Marcus tapped the tablet again, bringing up a new screen. We've prepared some preliminary numbers based on your current production capacity, he said, sliding the device toward Robert and Sarah. This is what a partnership might look like for Jenkins Farm. Robert found himself staring at figures that made his heart race. The guaranteed purchase prices were substantially higher than what he currently received through wholesale channels. The projected annual revenue was more than double what the farm had generated in its best year. Sarah, always the more financially minded of the two, was already asking sharp questions. These equipment upgrade subsidies, are they loans or grants? And what happens if a crop fails due to weather or disease? Are we still obligated to deliver the contracted amounts? Marcus fielded these questions with detailed answers that suggested they'd thought through these scenarios carefully. Insurance provisions, force majeure clauses, technical assistance. The program seemed designed to protect both Freshmark and the participating farms. As the discussion continued, Robert found himself becoming cautiously excited. If even half of what they were proposing came to fruition, it could transform their farm's prospects. They could pay off their debts, invest in the infrastructure improvements they'd been postponing for years, maybe even hire some help so Sarah could quit her diner job. But a lifetime of facing the harsh realities of farming had made him wary of promises. Why us? He asked finally, interrupting a technical explanation about distribution logistics. Out of all the farms in the region, why did you pick ours? Alex set down her coffee mug and looked directly at him. Honestly, it started with our encounter last week. You didn't know who I was, had no reason to help me beyond basic courtesy. Yet you took the time to draw me a detailed map in the dirt. You shared a local secret that covered bridge with a complete stranger because it was the right thing to do. When I offered to pay you for your help, you refused. She gestured toward the farm beyond the windows. Then I learned about how you've maintained this place through incredible challenges. How you focused on quality and sustainability even when it would have been easier to cut corners. The reviews from your customers are passionate people, drive out of their way to get your strawberries and tomatoes. Alex leaned forward slightly. The Rural Revival Initiative needs to start somewhere, with farms and farmers we believe in. Your operation fits our criteria perfectly, and after meeting you, I believe you embody the values this program is meant to support. Robert glanced at Sarah, seeing his own mixture of hope and hesitation reflected in her eyes. "We'd need time to consider this," he said. "To review the details, maybe consult with our lawyer." "Of course," Alex replied. "This would be a significant commitment for both parties. We have the full contract package here for you to review." Marcus produced a thick envelope from his portfolio and placed it on the table. "Take all the time you need. We're hoping to launch the initiative with our first partners in about a month, but there's no pressure for an immediate decision." She stood, signaling that the meeting was concluding. "My direct contact information is in there as well. Please reach out with any questions, no matter how small." Robert and Sarah walked their visitors back to their car, the conversation shifting to lighter topics: the weather forecast, the local area, Lily's upcoming high school graduation. As Alex was about to get into her Mercedes, she paused and turned back to them. "One more thing," she said. "If you do decide to join the initiative, we'd like Jenkins Farm to be our flagship partner. That would mean some additional responsibilities hosting occasional tours for other potential farm partners, participating in promotional activities, but also additional benefits." End quote. "Flagship partner?" Sarah repeated. "Why not one of the larger operations?" "Because size isn't our primary criteria," Alex explained. "We're looking for farms with a story, with heart, places that consumers can connect with emotionally. Jenkins Farm has been in the same family for 4 generations. That kind of history and commitment resonates with people." With that, she and Marcus said their goodbyes and drove away, leaving Robert and Sarah standing in their driveway, the contract envelope clutched in Robert's hands like a life preserver thrown to a drowning man. They watched until the Mercedes disappeared down the road, then turned to each other, both speechless for a moment. "Did that really just happen?" Sarah asked finally. Robert looked out at the envelope. "I think it did. Should we trust her?" Sarah's voice was quiet, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. Robert considered the question carefully. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I want to." Together, they walked back to the house, where they would spend the evening poring over the contract details, barely believing that a chance encounter with a lost traveler might have just changed everything. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind for the Jenkins family. After 2 days of careful review and a consultation with a lawyer friend from their church congregation, they had signed the partnership agreement with Freshmark. What followed was an intense period of preparation and adjustment as they began the process of integrating their farm into the Rural Revival Initiative. Marcus became a regular presence at the farm, overseeing the installation of new equipment, a modern irrigation system that used 40% less water, solar panels to reduce their electricity costs, and a small refrigerated storage unit that would extend the shelf life of their harvested produce. All were provided through the initiative's Sustainability Upgrade Program, part grant and part zero-interest loan to be repaid through their produce deliveries. Lily, initially skeptical of the sudden change in their fortunes, had thrown herself into the preparations with enthusiasm once she understood what it meant for her family. She'd created a social media presence for the farm, documenting the transformation with photos and stories that were already gathering the following. More importantly, she'd returned to talking about college, researching agricultural programs that would help her contribute to the farm's future. Today, Robert was standing in a newly cleared section of their property with Alex, discussing the expansion of their heirloom tomato operation. It was her 3rd visit since the partnership began, and he'd noticed how she always arrived without fanfare, dressed for farm work in jeans and boots, ready to get her hands dirty if necessary. "The soil analysis came back excellent for this area," Alex was saying, kneeling to scoop up a handful of dark earth. "High organic content, good drainage. It's perfect for the Cherokee purples and brandy wines." Robert nodded, still sometimes struck by her detailed knowledge of farming. "My grandfather always said this was the best soil on the property. He grew his prized tomatoes here before converting it to alfalfa for the dairy operation." "Your grandfather was right," Alex replied, standing in Dow, brushing her hands clean. "We could potentially double your tomato production with this expansion. and the market research shows demand for these varieties is growing faster than supply. Robert looked out over the land, trying to envision it covered in tomato plants, their fruits ripening in the summer sun. "It's a big change," he admitted, "but a good one, I think." They walked back toward the farmhouse, where Sarah was meeting with a marketing specialist from Freshmark about packaging and branding for their produce. The Rural Revival Initiative was creating distinct identities for each partner farm, telling their stories to consumers who increasingly wanted to know where their food came from. "How's Sarah doing with all of this?" Alex asked as they walked. "It's a lot of changes very quickly." Robert smiled. "She gave notice at the diner last week. First time in 5 years she hasn't had to work a second job." He paused, then added more quietly, "She cried that night, after she got home, said she'd forgotten what it felt like to have hope." Alex was silent for a moment. "Hope is a powerful thing," she said finally. "Sometimes, I think it's what keeps us all going, whether we're running a farm or a company." "Speaking of your company," Robert said, seizing the opening, "how's the board taking all this? From what I understand about corporate America, initiatives that don't maximize short-term profits aren't usually popular." Alex laughed, a surprisingly carefree sound. "You understand correctly. It's been challenging. Some board members see the vision, the long-term benefits of secure supply chains, quality differentiation, consumer goodwill. Others are focused solely on quarterly numbers." She shrugged. "But that's my battle to fight, not yours." They reached the farmhouse just as Sarah and the marketing specialist were concluding their meeting. The kitchen table was covered with design mock-ups, labels, packaging, even a logo for Jenkins Farm that incorporated elements of their history while looking fresh and contemporary. "Robert, look at these," Sarah called, her excitement evident. "They're going to create special displays in the stores, with our story and photos. People will know exactly who grew their food." The marketing specialist, a young woman named Priya, gathered her materials. "Mrs. Jenkins has wonderful instincts for what will resonate with consumers," she told Alex. "We've settled on a design direction that honors the farm's heritage, while feeling premium enough to support the price points." After Priya left, the four of them, Robert, Sarah, Alex, and Marcus, sat down for lunch. Sarah had prepared a meal showcasing their own produce, a salad of mixed greens and edible flowers, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread from a local bakery. The conversation flowed easily, touching on farm matters, but also extending to personal stories and shared interests. It was during this lunch that Alex brought up the idea that would take their partnership to another level. "We're planning the official launch event for the Rural Revival Initiative," she explained, accepting a second helping of Sarah's roasted vegetables. "A press conference, followed by a reception with food prepared using ingredients from our partner farms. The board wants to hold it at our headquarters in Philadelphia, but I've been pushing for something more authentic." "What did you have in mind?" Sarah asked. Alex gestured around them. A real working farm. Specifically, Jenkins Farm." Robert nearly choked on his water. "You want to hold a corporate press event here?" "I do," Alex confirmed. "Media, influencers, food writers, our major investors, all of them coming here to see what real farming looks like, to taste the difference in fresh, responsibly grown produce, to hear your story directly from you." "That sounds..." Robert searched for the right word. "Terrifying," Sarah supplied. Though she was smiling, Alex laughed. "It would be carefully managed. We'd handle all the logistics, preparation, cleanup. You wouldn't have to worry about anything except being yourselves." "And when would this happen?" Robert asked. 3 weeks from now," Marcus answered, consulting his tablet. "We'd need about 2 days for setup beforehand, and we'd compensate you for any disruption to your normal operations." Robert and Sarah exchanged one of their silent conversations, weighing the proposal. "It would be a powerful statement," Alex added. "Launching this initiative from a family farm rather than a corporate boardroom. Showing rather than telling what we're trying to accomplish." "And if we say no?" Sarah asked directly. "Then we respect your decision and hold the event elsewhere," Alex replied without hesitation. "This partnership is about mutual respect, not coercion." Robert considered the farm around them. It was already looking better with the new equipment and infrastructure improvements, but it was still a working farm, not a showplace. People in fancy clothes walking around in the dirt, he mused. Could be interesting. That's exactly the point, Alex said. We want them to see the reality of where food comes from, dirt and all. It's too easy in boardrooms and supermarkets to forget that real people grow our food, that it comes from the earth, not from packaging. After further discussion of the practical details, Robert and Sarah agreed to host the launch event. As their visitors prepared to leave, Robert walked Alex to her car. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, he said as they reached the Mercedes. That first day, when you got lost, was it really by accident? Alex smiled. Completely by accident. The best things often are. She opened her car door, then paused. But choosing to come back wasn't an accident. Neither was seeing the potential in this place. She gestured toward the farm. Sometimes, we get lucky enough to find exactly what we've been looking for, even when we didn't know we were looking. As Robert watched her drive away, he thought about luck and choices, about maps drawn in dirt and lives changed by chance encounters. The future still wasn't certain. Farming never offered guarantees, but for the first time in years, it held more promise than peril. He turned back toward his fields, where the afternoon sun was gilding the crops in golden light, and felt something unfamiliar but welcome settle in his chest. The weight of hope, substantial and real. The day of the Rural Revival Initiative launch arrived with perfect early autumn weather. Crisp morning air that warmed to a comfortable temperature by midday. Sunlight that seemed to make the colors of the farm more vivid, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of earth and growing things. Jenkins' farm had been transformed, though not in ways that diminished its authenticity. A large tent stood in the cleared area near the barn, its sides rolled up to allow views of the surrounding fields. Inside, tables were arranged with white cloths and simple centerpieces of flowers and herbs grown on the farm. A small stage with a podium had been set up at one end, with the farm's fields as a backdrop. Throughout the property, discreet signage had been placed to identify different crops and explain sustainable farming practices. The temporary path of wooden planks had been laid to allow guests in city shoes to tour the fields without sinking into the soil. Near the farmhouse, local chefs were preparing dishes using produce from Jenkins' farm and the other inaugural partners in the Rural Revival Initiative. Robert stood at the edge of the tomato field, watching the activity with a mixture of pride and disbelief. He was dressed in what Sarah called his Sunday best clean jeans, a pressed blue button-down shirt, and boots that had been polished for the first time in years. He'd drawn the line at a tie, despite Lily's insistence. "Dad!" His daughter's voice drew his attention. Lily was hurrying toward him, looking grown-up and professional in a simple dress, her camera hanging around her neck. At 17, she already had the confident bearing of someone much older, a quality that sometimes made Robert's heart ache with a complicated mixture of pride and nostalgia for her childhood. "They're starting to arrive," she informed him, slightly breathless. "The first media vans just pulled in, and Ms. Pierce's car is about 5 minutes out, according to Marcus." Robert nodded, swallowing against the sudden dryness in his throat. "Where's your mother?" "Finishing up in the house. She says she'll be ready on time, but she's changed her outfit twice already." Lily grinned. Then her expression softened. "This is really happening, isn't it, Dad?" "Seems that way," he replied, putting an arm around her shoulders. They stood for a moment, taking in the scene before them. Their family farm, about to become the centerpiece of a corporate initiative that could change the way Americans thought about their food and the people who grew it. "I'm proud of you," Lily said suddenly. "Both of you. For not giving up, even when things were really bad." Robert squeezed her shoulder, unable to find words past the lump in his throat. They had come so close to losing everything. And now here they were, on the verge of a new chapter that neither of them could have imagined just a month ago. The sound of vehicles approaching broke the moment. Lily straightened, adjusting her camera. "That'll be the press. I promised Marcus I'd get some candid shots of their arrival. You should head over to the greeting area." Robert watched her hurry off, camera already raised, then turned toward the farmhouse to find Sarah. She was in their bedroom, standing before the mirror with an expression of uncertainty, that vanished when she saw him in the doorway. "How do I look?" she asked, smoothing the front of her floral dress, one she'd bought years ago for a cousin's wedding and had rarely had occasion to wear since. "Beautiful," he answered truthfully. The past weeks had eased some of the exhaustion from her face, softened the worry lines around her eyes. There was a light in her again that had been dimming for too long. Sarah smiled, crossing to adjust his collar. "Not so bad yourself, Farmer Jenkins." She took a deep breath. "Ready to become the face of corporate America's newfound conscience?" He chuckled at her dry tone. "When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous." "The whole thing is a little ridiculous," she agreed. "But in a good way, I think." She took his hand. "Let's go greet our guests." They walked together to the front of the property, where Marcus had established a welcome area. Vehicles were now arriving, steadily sleek town cars carrying executives and investors, vans with television network logos, SUVs disgorging photographers with multiple cameras slung over their shoulders. Among them, Robert spotted the familiar black Mercedes pulling up. Alex emerged, looking every inch the corporate CEO in a tailored pantsuit, her hair swept up elegantly. Yet when she spotted Robert and Sarah, her smile was warm and genuine as she approached them. "The place looks amazing," she said, embracing Sarah briefly and shaking Robert's hand. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as we'll ever be," Robert replied. "Just remember," Alex said, lowering her voice, "this is your story to tell. These people are here to see authentic farmers, not corporate spokespersons. Just be yourselves." With that reassurance, she moved off to greet arriving board members, leaving Robert and Sarah to welcome a steady stream of visitors. Robert was surprised to find himself warming to the task. These city people, with their expensive clothes and careful questions, were genuinely interested in the farm, in how food was grown, in the challenges small farmers faced. Their ignorance about agricultural realities was often startling, but their curiosity seemed sincere. By the time everyone had assembled under the tent for the formal presentation, Robert's initial nervousness had given way to a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about saving his farm. It was about helping people understand where their food came from, about creating connections between the land and those who benefited from its bounty. He took his place near the stage as Alex approached the podium. The crowd quieted, cameras focused on her poised figure against the backdrop of Jenkins's farm's fields. "Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us at this rather unconventional venue for a corporate announcement," Alex began, her voice clear and confident. "We could have hosted this event in our Philadelphia headquarters, with slides and graphs and the usual trappings of a business presentation. Instead, we wanted you to feel the soil beneath your feet, to smell the growing plants, to see firsthand the reality of American farming." She gestured toward the fields. Jenkins Farm has been in continuous operation since 1923, 4 generations of the same family working this land to produce food for their community. Like thousands of family farms across America, it has faced enormous challenges in recent decades, challenges created in part by the very industry I represent." End quote. Robert listened as Alex outlined the crisis facing small farmers, the consolidation of the food supply chain, the environmental and social costs of industrial agriculture. She didn't shy away from Freshmark's own role in these problems, acknowledging that grocery chains had prioritized uniformity in price over quality and sustainability. "The Rural Revival Initiative represents our commitment to reversing that trend," she continued. "By partnering directly with farms like this one, eliminating middlemen, and paying prices that reflect the true value of responsibly grown food, we believe we can create a more equitable, sustainable food system, one that's better for farmers, better for consumers, better for the land, and ultimately, better for our business." She introduced the other inaugural farm partners, a dairy operation from Vermont, an apple orchard from New York, a vegetable farm from Maryland, and a berry farm from Virginia. Representatives from each stood to applause. Then Alex turned toward Robert and Sarah. "But today, I want to particularly recognize our flagship partners, Robert and Sarah Jenkins. Their commitment to quality and sustainability, despite enormous financial pressures, exemplifies everything this initiative stands for." She smiled at them. And I should mention, they had no idea who I was when they helped me find my way after I got hopelessly lost on these back roads a month ago. This drew appreciative laughter from the crowd. Alex continued, I'd like to invite Robert to say a few words about what this partnership means for Jenkins Farm. Robert felt Sarah squeeze his hand encouragingly as he rose and made his way to the podium. Looking out at the assembled crowd, the media with their cameras, the executives in their business attire, the food writers scribbling notes, he was momentarily at a loss. Then his eyes found Lily, standing to the side with her camera, giving him a thumbs up. He took a deep breath and began to speak. I'm not much for public speaking, he started, earning another gentle laugh. I'm more comfortable with plants than people most days. But I'd like to tell you about this land, about what it means to my family, and about why this partnership matters. For the next few minutes, Robert spoke from the heart about the farm's history, about the challenges they'd faced, about coming to the brink of losing everything. He talked about the pressure to cut corners, to use more chemicals, to abandon the sustainable practices his grandfather had taught him. He spoke about the painful irony of growing food he couldn't afford to buy in the stores. When Alex Pierce showed up on our doorstep and laid out this initiative, my first thought was that it was too good to be true, he admitted. Farmers learn to be skeptical of promises. But this wasn't just talk. It was action. In the past month, we've installed solar panels, improved our irrigation system, expanded our heirloom varieties, and most importantly, secured a future for this farm. My daughter can go to college knowing this place will still be here when she graduates. He gestured to the fields around them. This isn't just about saving one farm. It's about recognizing that how we grow our food matters, that the people who grow it matter, that the decisions made in corporate boardrooms and grocery aisles have real impacts on families like mine and communities like ours." End quote. He paused, then added, "And it's about believing that companies like Freshmark can be part of the solution, not just part of the problem." The applause that followed was genuine and sustained. As Robert returned to his seat, he caught Alex's eye. She nodded, a simple gesture of respect that meant more to him than the public accolades. The formal presentation concluded with Alex announcing the rollout timeline. Jenkins farm products would begin appearing in Freshmark stores the following week, with other partner farms following over the next month. A short video played, featuring aerial footage of the partner farms and interviews with the farmers, including clips of Robert and Sarah that had been recorded the previous week. After the presentation, guests were invited to tour the farm in small groups, followed by a reception featuring dishes prepared with ingredients from the partner farms. Robert found himself moving from group to group, answering questions about crop rotation, pest management, soil health, and dozens of other aspects of farming that these city dwellers found fascinating. It was during one of these conversations that he noticed Alex standing slightly apart, watching the proceedings with a satisfied expression. Excusing himself, he made his way over to her. "Quite a show you've put on," he said, nodding toward the mingling guests. "The real show is the farm," she replied. "We just provided the audience. Still, it can't have been easy convincing your board to back something like this. I imagine the numbers people aren't thrilled about the investment costs." Alex shrugged slightly. "Some battles are worth fighting, and some investments can't be measured in quarterly returns." She looked out over the farm. "My parents lost their dairy farm when I was 14. By the time I was in a position to help them buy it back, it had been parceled off for vacation homes. Some things, once lost, can't be recovered." Robert was silent, absorbing this revelation. It explained so much about her passion for the initiative, her detailed knowledge of farming, her understanding of what was at stake for families like his. "I didn't know," he said finally. "It's not something I talk about much in business circles," she admitted. "Sentimentality isn't particularly valued in corporate America. But it is valued here," Robert said, gesturing to his land. "Sentimentality, tradition, continuity, they matter in farming. Not just because of nostalgia, but because there's wisdom in them. Knowledge passed down, relationships with the land that deepen over generations." Alex nodded. "That's exactly what I've been trying to explain to my board, that there's value in these connections, tangible and intangible. She turned to face him directly. "This is just the beginning, Robert. If we can make this work, if we can prove that this model is viable, we can expand it. Hundreds of farms, thousands of acres, millions of consumers reconnecting with where their food comes from." "And if it doesn't work?" he asked, the farmer's pragmatism asserting itself. "Then we'll have tried something meaningful," she answered simply. "And your farm, at least, will be on solid footing regardless. The contract guarantees that." Before Robert could respond, they were joined by a group of food writers, eager to speak with Alex about the culinary aspects of the initiative. He excused himself and continued his hosting duties, but her words stayed with him, the acknowledgement of risk alongside the commitment to something larger than profit margins. As the event wound down and guests began to depart, Robert found himself standing with Sarah and Lily near the farmhouse, watching the sunset paint the fields in golden light. The staff from Freshmark were efficiently dismantling the tent and other temporary structures, leaving little evidence of the day's activities. "Well," Sarah said, leaning against his shoulder, "that was certainly the most exciting thing to happen on this farm since that tornado in '07. Robert chuckled. "Less destructive, though." "Actually," Lily chimed in, scrolling through the photos on her camera, "it might be the opposite. That tornado took down the old oak tree. This could change everything." They were quiet for a moment, contemplating the truth in her words. Then, Sarah straightened up. "I should go check on that food writer who wanted my heirloom tomato sauce recipe. She said she might feature it in her column." As Sarah walked away, Lily showed Robert some of the photos she'd taken throughout the day. Among them was a striking image of Alex and Robert talking in the tomato field during the tour. The CEO in her elegant attire, contrasting with the farmer in his work clothes. Both of them focused intently on a Cherokee purple tomato Robert held between them. "That's a good one," Robert said, surprised by how well the photo captured the essence of the day, the unlikely connection between two different worlds, united by something as simple and profound as food. "I'm going to send it to Ms. Pierce," Lily decided. "I think she'd like it." Later that evening, after the last of the event staff had departed, and the farm had returned to its normal quiet state, the Jenkins family sat on their porch, too wired from the day's events to sleep. "So," Robert said, breaking a comfortable silence, "what do we think? Was today the beginning of something real, or just an elaborate publicity stunt?" "Both, maybe," Sarah answered thoughtfully. "But I don't think that makes it any less valuable. The money is real, the contract is real, the new equipment is real." She gestured toward the dark silhouettes of the solar panels. "Even if the warm, fuzzy feelings fade, those things remain." "Ms. Pierce seems sincere," Lily offered. "And smart. She knows this has to work financially, or it won't last, no matter how good the intentions are." Robert nodded, thinking about what Alex had revealed about her own farming background. "I believe she's in it for the right reasons," he said. "And she's positioned herself and Freshmark to succeed only if we succeed too. That's about as good an alignment of interests as we could hope for." They fell silent again, listening to the night sounds of the farm crickets chirping, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of a breeze through the corn. "You know," Sarah said after a while, "whatever happens with Freshmark and the initiative, we did something important today. All those people, journalists, executives, chefs, they saw a real farm. They heard about real challenges. Maybe they'll think differently about their food now, about where it comes from and who grows it." End quote. "Maybe," Robert agreed. "And maybe that's enough, even if nothing else changes." But as he looked out over his fields, silvered now in the moonlight, he allowed himself to hope that everything might change, not just for Jenkins' farm, but for all the family farms struggling to survive in a system that had forgotten their value. It was a fragile hope, born of a chance encounter with a lost traveler who turned out to be exactly the ally they needed at exactly the right moment. Sometimes, Robert reflected, the most important turns in life's journey begin with someone simply asking for directions. 6 months later, Robert stood in the produce section of the Freshmark store in Lancaster, watching as a young mother explained to her curious daughter where the tomatoes in their cart had come from. "See, it says right here Jenkins Farm." the woman was saying, pointing to the prominently displayed sign above the display. That's not far from here. There's a picture of the farmer and everything. The little girl studied the photo, a professionally shot image of Robert in his fields with solemn attention. Does he have a tractor? She asked. I bet he does, her mother replied. Maybe we can visit the farm sometime. They have special days when people can come see how the food grows. Robert smiled to himself, resisting the urge to introduce himself. These moments had become increasingly common as the Rural Revival Initiative had gained momentum. The Meet Your Farmer sections in Freshmark stores across the region were drawing attention, creating exactly the kind of consumer connection that Alex had envisioned. He continued through the store, noting with satisfaction how many products from the initiative's partner farms were now featured. What had begun with 5 farms had expanded to 23, with more being evaluated for inclusion. The distinctive packaging and signage made it easy for shoppers to identify locally grown, sustainably produced options. After completing his shopping, still strange to be buying things with actual money in his pocket, Robert headed to the cafe area at the front of the store. Alex was already there, laptop open on the table before her, a cup of coffee at her elbow. She spotted him and waved him over. Sorry I'm late, he said, setting down his shopping bag and taking the seat opposite her. Got distracted watching a customer explain to her daughter where our tomatoes come from. Alex smiled. That's exactly what we want to hear. The consumer research is showing strong positive responses to the farm stories we're sharing. People feel connected to their food in a new way. And the board? Are they seeing the numbers they want? Surprisingly, yes, Alex replied, turning her laptop so he could see the screen. Sales of initiative products are outperforming projections by 22%. Customer loyalty metrics are up, and the press coverage has been invaluable. You can't buy that kind of positive publicity. Robert nodded, genuinely pleased but not surprised. The quality of the produce spoke for itself, and people were willing to pay a bit more when they understood the value proposition better. Taste, more nutritional content, environmental sustainability, and support for local farmers. How are things at the farm? Alex asked, closing her laptop to give him her full attention. Busy, Robert answered with a smile. Spring planting is in full swing. We've hired 3 full-time employees, which still feels strange after years of barely keeping ourselves afloat. The new greenhouse is up and running, and the irrigation upgrades are making a huge difference in water usage. And Sarah and Lily? Sarah's loving having the farm store open 3 days a week. Turns out, she has a knack for retail customers. Love her cooking demonstrations and recipe tips. And Lily? He paused, a surge of paternal pride rising. She got her acceptance letter from Cornell yesterday. Full scholarship to their agriculture program. Robert, that's wonderful, Alex exclaimed. You must be so proud. Terrified is more like it, he admitted with a chuckle. Ithaca is a long way from Lancaster. But yes, incredibly proud. She's already talking about bringing new sustainable farming techniques back to Jenkins farm after graduation. Their conversation continued, touching on business matters, expansion plans for the initiative, marketing strategies for the coming summer season, logistics improvements, but also on personal topics. Alex spoke about her efforts to balance the demands of her position with her desire to stay connected to the farming community. Robert shared stories about the Begia, other farm partners, many of whom had become friends as they navigated this new venture together. As their meeting concluded and they prepared to go their separate ways, Alex handed Robert a small envelope. Before I forget the photos from the 1-year anniversary event next month. The marketing team wanted your approval before finalizing. Still can't believe it's been almost a year, Robert commented, accepting the envelope. Time flies when you're revolutionizing the grocery industry. Alex replied with a grin. They walked together to the parking lot, where Robert's truck, a newer, more reliable model purchased with the farm's improved income, was parked beside Alex's Mercedes. You know, Robert said as they reached their vehicles, I've been thinking about that day you got lost and ended up at our farm. What are the odds that the CEO of a major grocery chain would take a wrong turn and run into a farmer on the verge of losing everything? Pretty astronomical, Alex agreed, but I'm grateful for faulty GPS systems and covered bridges that don't appear on maps. Me too, Robert said sincerely. though I like to think it wasn't entirely chance. That maybe, in some way, we were meant to find each other." Alex smiled. "The pragmatic businesswoman in me should scoff at that, but the farm girl from Vermont kind of agrees with you." She extended her hand. "Until next month's celebration?" Robert shook her hand, reflecting on how this simple gesture had evolved from their first awkward meeting him with dirt-covered hands, her in designer clothes, to this moment of mutual respect and partnership. "Looking forward to it," he replied. As he drove back to the farm, Robert considered the journey of the past year. The Rural Revival Initiative wasn't perfect. There had been growing pains, logistical challenges, occasional tensions between corporate expectations and agricultural realities. But it was working, not just for Jenkins Farm, but for all the partners involved. More importantly, it was changing the Burras. Conversation about food, farming, and the connections between producers and consumers. He thought about the little girl in the store, learning where her tomatoes came from, perhaps planting a seed of understanding that would grow as she did. He thought about Lily, preparing to take the family's agricultural knowledge to a new level with her education. He thought about Sarah, finally able to share her passion for cooking and food with a wider community through the farm store. And he thought about a map drawn in dirt, a chance encounter that had blossomed into something neither participant could have imagined. Sometimes, Robert reflected, the most important journeys begin when we're lost, when we have to look up from our predetermined paths and see the possibilities we might otherwise have missed. By the time he reached Jenkins Farm, the sun might try, was setting, casting long shadows across fields that were now secure for generations to come. Robert parked his truck and stood for a moment, taking in the sight of his land, the new greenhouse gleaming in the distance, the solar panels catching the last rays of sunlight, the farmhouse with lights already on as Sarah prepared dinner. He walked toward home, grateful for wrong turns and covered bridges, for CEOs who remembered their farming roots, and for the simple human connection that had begun with directions drawn in the dirt. The boardroom of Freshmark's Philadelphia headquarters fell silent as Alex concluded her presentation. The quarterly review of the Rural Revival Initiative, now in its third year, had just revealed its strongest performance to date. "To summarize," Alex said, standing confidently before the projected slides, "the initiative has expanded to include 78 farm partners across 6 states. Sales of RRI products have increased 18% year-over-year, with profit margins exceeding our conventional supply chain by an average of 3.2%. Customer loyalty metrics show that shoppers who regularly purchase initiative products visit our stores 22% more frequently and spend 31% more per visit than the average Freshmark customer." She clicked to the final slide, which showed a family, the Jenkinses, standing proudly before their thriving farm. Beyond the numbers, the initiative has generated incalculable goodwill and positioned Freshmark as an industry leader in sustainability and community investment. The feature in Time magazine last month highlighted our model as a potential blueprint for addressing both agricultural sustainability and food security challenges nationwide. Alex took her seat at the head of the table as the lights came up. The board members exchanged glances, some nodding appreciatively, others reviewing the printed materials before them with careful scrutiny. "Impressive results, Alexandra," said Howard Daniels, the longest-serving board member and initially one of the initiative's most vocal skeptics. "I'll admit I had serious doubts when you first proposed this 3 years ago. It seemed idealistic." He adjusted his glasses, studying the financial summary. "But the numbers are compelling, particularly the customer loyalty metrics." "Thank you, Howard," Alex replied. "It's been a learning process for all of us. We've had to adapt our expectations and methods to agricultural realities, but that flexibility has ultimately strengthened the program." "And the scalability question?" asked Patricia Wong, who headed the board's expansion committee. "You mentioned 78 farms currently. What's the ceiling here? Can this model support our growth targets in new markets?" "That's our current focus," Alex acknowledged. "We're developing regional hubs to allow for expansion without losing the local connection that makes the initiative successful. Our agronomists and supply chain specialists are identifying potential partner farms in each new market region, well before store openings, end quote. The discussion continued, with board members raising questions about everything from weather-related supply disruptions to marketing strategies for different demographic segments. Alex fielded each query with data-supported responses, occasionally deferring to members of her executive team for specific details. As the meeting concluded, Alex gathered her materials, pleased with the board's reception but already mentally cataloging the challenges ahead. The Rural Revival Initiative had grown beyond her initial vision, evolving into a core component of Freshmark's brand identity and business strategy. With success came increased scrutiny and higher stakes realities, she acknowledged while remaining committed to the program's founding principles. She was about to leave the boardroom when Howard Daniels approached her. "A moment, Alexandra?" "Of course," she replied, setting her portfolio down. Howard had been a mentor of sorts throughout her career at Freshmark, though their relationship had been strained when she first proposed the initiative. At 72, he represented the old guard of retail grocery, pragmatic, profit-focused, and deeply skeptical of what he'd initially dismissed as feel-good sustainability theater. "I wanted to congratulate you privately," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Not just on the numbers, though they're certainly worth celebrating, but on staying true to your vision despite considerable resistance, including from me." He offered a small, self-deprecating smile. "It takes courage to champion change in an industry as traditionally minded as ours." Alex was momentarily speechless, unaccustomed to such direct praise from the normally reserved board member. "Thank you, Howard. That means a great deal, especially coming from you." He nodded, then added, "I visited one of the partner farms last month, the Jenkins place. My granddaughter's school arranged a field trip there. Educational program of some sort." "Yes, Robert and Sarah have become quite passionate about agricultural education," Alex confirmed. "They host school groups regularly now." "I didn't identify myself as a board member," Howard continued. "Just another grandparent chaperone. But I was impressed, Alexandra. Not just with the operation, which is clearly thriving, but with the genuine enthusiasm everyone there showed for what they're doing." The Jenkins fellow spent an hour with a group of 8-year-olds, explaining soil health in terms they could understand, letting them plant seedlings in the greenhouse. He paused. "My granddaughter hasn't stopped talking about where food comes from since." Alex smiled, picturing Robert in his element, passing on his knowledge to a new generation. "That connection is exactly what we hope to foster," she said. "Between farms and families, between producers and consumers." "Well, it's working," Howard replied simply. He hesitated, then added, "My father was a farmer, you know, in western Pennsylvania. Lost the place during the farm crisis in the 80s. I've never talked about it much, seemed irrelevant to my career in retail, but watching Jenkins with those children, seeing his pride in the land." He trailed off, then cleared his throat. "In any case, I wanted you to know that I see the value in what you've built here, beyond the quarterly numbers." With that, he nodded and departed, leaving Alex momentarily alone in the boardroom. She stood there for a moment, absorbing the unexpected personal revelation from a man she'd known for over a decade without ever glimpsing this part of his history. It was a reminder, she thought, of how many hidden connections existed between people, threads of experience that remained invisible until something or someone drew them to the surface. How many others around the conference table carried similar stories? How many Freshmark customers had their own connections to farming, perhaps long forgotten until they saw the face and story of a real farmer alongside the produce in their grocery cart? The Rural Revival Initiative had begun as a business strategy with a personal motivation, inspired by her own family's loss. It had evolved into something larger, a bridge between worlds that had grown too far apart, a recognition that the path from field to table was traveled by real people whose stories mattered. As Alex left the boardroom and headed toward her next meeting, she made a mental note to call Robert Jenkins that evening. The Time magazine feature had brought new attention to the initiative, and she wanted to ensure he and the other original partners were prepared for the increased interest. More importantly, she wanted to hear how Lily was doing in her final year at Cornell, and whether Sarah's cookbook project was progressing. These personal connections, maintained despite her packed executive schedule, remained central to Alex's vision for the initiative. The relationships were real, extending beyond contractual obligations to genuine friendship and mutual respect. In a business world often dominated by impersonal transactions and abstract data, these human bonds provided both meaning and competitive advantage, a lesson Alex had learned from a map drawn in dirt by a farmer who had no idea he was showing the way to a CEO seeking a path forward. Robert Jenkins stood at the edge of his largest field, watching as his daughter directed the drone flying above the crops. At 26, Lily had grown into a formidable agricultural entrepreneur, combining her father's intuitive understanding of the land with cutting-edge technology and business acumen gained through her Cornell education and subsequent MBA. "The thermal imaging is showing possible irrigation issues in the northwest quadrant," she called to him, eyes on the tablet in her hands. "Nothing serious yet, but we should check the lines before it becomes a problem." Robert nodded, making a mental note to investigate. After 9 years as part of the Rural Revival Initiative, Jenkins' farm had expanded to 120 acres, with sophisticated monitoring systems that would have seemed like science fiction to his grandfather. The original farmhouse still stood, though now accompanied by a modern office building that housed the farm's administrative operations, a visitor center for educational tours, and a commercial kitchen where Sarah developed recipes featuring their produce for her best-selling cookbook series. "Dad, come look at this," Lily said, bringing the tablet over to him. "I'm seeing unusual growth patterns in the experimental hemp section. It might be responding better than expected to the new organic fertilizer blend." Robert studied the thermal images, still sometimes amazed by his daughter's facility with technology that he himself had only grudgingly adopted. "Looks promising," he agreed. "We should let the research team at Freshmark know." As if on cue, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Alex. "Annual partner meeting still on for 2 p.m.? Board members eager to see hemp pilot project." "Speaking of Freshmark," Robert said, showing Lily the message. "Looks like we'll have company this afternoon." Lily nodded, taking the drone controller back. "I'll finish the survey and compile the data for the presentation. Mom's already preparing lunch for everyone." Robert texted a quick confirmation to Alex, then gazed out over his land. Jenkins' farm had become a showcase for the Rural Revival Initiative, hosting regular visits from other farmers, food industry executives, agricultural students, and policymakers interested in sustainable farming practices. The hemp project was the latest innovation, an exploration of its potential for food products, textiles, and biodegradable packaging that could eventually replace plastic in Freshmark stores. Later that afternoon, Robert stood with Alex in that same field, now watching as Lily presented the preliminary hemp data to a group that included 3 Freshmark board members, representatives from 2 environmental certification organizations, and a USDA official. "She's remarkable," Alex said quietly. "Cornell offered her a position on their agricultural extension faculty, you know." "She mentioned it," Robert replied. "Turned them down. Said she'd rather be putting theory into practice here." Alex smiled. "Can't say I'm surprised." Jenkins' farm is becoming quite the agricultural research hub. Between the hemp project, the drought-resistant vegetable varieties, and the soil carbon sequestration program, you're hardly a simple tomato farm anymore. Robert chuckled. "Still grow a damn good tomato, though." "The best," Alex agreed. "Which reminds me, the chef at the White House requested Jenkins' farm Cherokee purples specifically for the state dinner next month. Apparently, the French president developed a taste for them during his last visit." "Sarah mentioned something about that," Robert said, still a bit bemused by how far their produce now traveled. "She's been invited to contribute a recipe to the menu as well." They watched as Lily concluded her presentation to appreciative nods from the visitors. The group began moving toward the next stop on their tour, the high-efficiency greenhouse complex that produced specialty crops year-round. "Hard to believe it's been 9 years, Robert mused, as he and Alex followed at a more leisurely pace. "Sometimes I still expect to wake up and find it was all a dream, that I'm still broke, the bank's still threatening foreclosure, and you're just a lost tourist who needed directions." Alex laughed. "I sometimes have the same thought." Then I walk into a board meeting where everyone's discussing soil health metrics and regenerative agriculture as if they've been farming all their lives, and I realize how far we've all come. The Rural Revival Initiative had indeed come far from its modest beginnings. What had started with 5 farms had expanded to over 200 partners across 12 states. Freshmark had become the industry leader in local sourcing and sustainable agriculture, forcing competitors to develop similar programs to keep pace. More importantly, the initiative had helped stabilize rural communities, preserving farmland that might otherwise have been lost to development and creating viable career paths for a new generation of farmers. "We're making a difference, aren't we?" Robert asked as they paused at the edge of the hemp field. It wasn't really a question seeking reassurance, more a moment of reflection on the journey they'd shared. "We are," Alex confirmed. "Not just for the farms in the program, but for the industry, for consumers, for the land itself." She gestured toward the visitors now entering the greenhouse. "Look at that group, corporate executives walking alongside government officials and environmental advocates, all focused on the same goals." That wasn't happening 9 years ago. Robert nodded, watching as his daughter, confident, knowledgeable, passionate about the farm that had nearly slipped away before she could inherit it, led the diverse group through an explanation of their latest innovations. Sarah emerged from the visitor center to join the tour, carrying samples of hemp-based food products she'd developed for them to taste. "Your family has been at the heart of it all," Alex continued. "Not just providing exceptional produce, but helping us tell the story, connect with other farmers, refine the model." The Jenkins name means something in agricultural circles now. Robert felt a surge of pride, not just in his family's accomplishments, but in being part of something larger than themselves. The initiative had preserved not only individual farms, but a way of life, a connection to the land that industrial agriculture had nearly severed. "It started with directions drawn in dirt," he said, smiling at the memory. "Who would have thought it would lead here?" Alex's phone chimed with a message, and she checked it briefly. "The board wants to extend the tour to see the soil carbon measurement stations. Do you mind?" "Not at all," Robert replied. "Lily can handle that part better than I can anyway. All those sensors and data points still confuse me sometimes." As they walked toward the group, Alex said, "By the way, the flagship store in Boston is featuring Jenkins Farm for their 10th anniversary celebration next month. They'd like you, Sarah, and Lily to attend if possible. All expenses paid, of course." "Boston, huh?" Robert considered this. "I suppose we could manage that. The seasonal staff can handle things here for a few days." "Excellent. The marketing team will be thrilled. Apparently, the original 5 farms have quite a following among our long-term customers. People feel like they know your family after all these years of seeing your stories in our stores." They rejoined the tour group just as Lily was explaining how the carbon sequestration monitoring worked, her hands moving animatedly as she described the environmental and economic benefits of building soil organic matter. The board members were listening with genuine interest, asking informed questions that showed how far their understanding of agricultural systems had evolved since the initiative began. Robert felt a hand slip into his and turned to find Sarah beside him. She'd been so busy with the lunch preparation that they'd barely spoken since morning. "How's it going?" she asked quietly. "Good," he replied. "Lily's impressing everyone, as usual." Sarah smiled, watching their daughter with evident pride. "She called last night after you'd gone to bed. Wanted to run some ideas by me for expanding the educational programs." "Oh? What's she thinking now?" "A formal internship program for agricultural students. 6-month rotations, housing in that old Smith property that came up for sale. She's already talking to the community college in Penn State about partnerships." Robert shook his head in amazement. "Never stops, does she?" "Gets that from you," Sarah replied, squeezing his hand, "always looking to the horizon." As the tour continued, Robert found himself reflecting on Sarah's words. He had always been a forward-thinking farmer, willing to try new varieties and techniques when many of his peers stuck rigidly to traditional methods. But the scale of innovation now happening at Jenkins Farm went far beyond anything he could have imagined. The Rural Revival Initiative had provided the security that allowed for experimentation without existential risk, with guaranteed fair prices for their core crops. They could dedicate portions of the expanded acreage to research projects, new varieties, and educational programs. What had begun as a simple farm growing quality produce had evolved into a complex agricultural enterprise that produced food, knowledge, and hope for the future of farming. Later that evening, after the visitors had departed and the day's work was done, the Jenkins family gathered around the kitchen table with Alex for a casual dinner. These informal meals had become a tradition whenever she visited the farm, a chance to set aside business matters and enjoy the fruits of their partnership in the most literal sense. "This hempseed bread is incredible, Sarah," Alex said, accepting another slice. "Is this recipe going in the new cookbook?" "It is," Sarah confirmed, passing a bowl of fresh salad, along with the hemp milk and that roasted vegetable dish Lily created. "The publisher is pushing for a fall release to coincide with harvest season." The conversation flowed easily, touching on personal matters, Alex's recent hiking trip to Vermont, Lily's tentative steps into the dating world, the community theater production Sarah was helping to costume, as well as broader agricultural trends and Freshmark's ongoing expansion. "We're looking at potential partner farms in California now," Alex mentioned as they moved on to dessert a strawberry tart featuring berries from Jenkins Farm's newest fields. "The drought conditions there present different challenges, but the principles are the same." "I've been corresponding with a few farmers in the Central Valley," Lily added. "They're interested in our water conservation techniques. I've offered to consult if Freshmark decides to move forward with partnerships there." Robert listened to this exchange with quiet satisfaction. His daughter, not yet 30, was already being sought out for her expertise by farmers twice her age. The Jenkins name had come to represent innovation and success in sustainable agriculture, a far cry from the struggling operation on the verge of foreclosure 9 years ago. As the evening wound down and they moved to the porch for coffee, Robert found himself sitting beside Alex in the gathering twilight, watching fireflies begin to flicker over the fields. "I got a call from Howard Daniels yesterday," Alex said after a comfortable silence. "He's retiring from the board at the end of the year." "The skeptic who became a believer?" Robert asked, remembering the initially doubtful board member who had gradually become one of the initiative's strongest advocates. Alex nodded. "The very same. He wanted me to pass along his regards to you and Sarah. Said his granddaughter just started at Cornell, majoring in agricultural science. Apparently, that school tour here 5 years ago made quite an impression." Robert smiled, watching as Sarah and Lily cleared the dessert dishes inside, their laughter drifting through the screen door. "It's strange to think about all the ripple effects, isn't it? How many lives have been touched because you took a wrong turn that day, or because you took the time to help a stranger?" Alex countered. "We both played our parts." "I suppose we did," Robert agreed. He hesitated, then added, "You know, when we signed that first contract, I was still half convinced it would all fall apart. That Freshmark would change direction, or the board would pull the plug, or consumers wouldn't care enough about where their food came from to pay a little more for it." "I had similar fears," Alex admitted. "Corporate initiatives come and go. I've seen plenty of promising programs abandoned when quarterly numbers dipped or leadership changed." "What made this one different?" Alex considered the question, watching the fireflies dance above the darkening fields. "Authenticity, I think. We weren't just creating a marketing campaign or checking a corporate social responsibility box. We were addressing real problems with practical solutions that benefited everyone involved." She turned to look at him. "And we had partners who believed in it as much as we did, who were willing to adapt and grow alongside us." Robert nodded, understanding that she was acknowledging the commitment his family had made to the initiative's success. They hadn't simply taken the financial lifeline and continued with business as usual. They had embraced the vision and helped to expand it, becoming ambassadors for a new model of agriculture that balanced commerce with stewardship. "It's funny," he said after a moment. "When you first explained the initiative to us at this very table 9 years ago, I was thinking mostly about saving our farm, about being able to pay the mortgage and keep the lights on. I never imagined." He gestured toward the property around them, encompassing the expanded fields, the new buildings, the experimental crops, and the future they represented. "Neither did I," Alex replied honestly. "I was hoping to create a viable alternative sourcing model and maybe help a few dozen farms stay afloat. I didn't anticipate how it would transform Freshmark's entire approach to business, or how it would inspire competitors to develop their own versions. They fell silent again, each contemplating the journey from that first meeting to this moment. The Rural Revival Initiative had evolved far beyond its original scope, influencing agricultural policy, consumer expectations, and corporate practices throughout the food industry. What had begun as a pilot program with 5 farms had become a movement, with Jenkins Farm at its heart. Sarah and Lily joined them on the porch, bringing fresh coffee and comfortable conversation as the stars began to appear overhead. The 4 of them talked late into the evening, sometimes about business matters, but more often about personal hopes and reflections. The lines between professional partnership and friendship had blurred long ago, creating a relationship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. As the evening drew to a close, and Alex prepared to leave, she paused by her car and turned to the Jenkins family standing on the porch. "I almost forgot to mention," she called. "The Smithsonian has reached out about featuring the Rural Revival Initiative in an upcoming exhibition on innovations in American agriculture. They'd like to include artifacts and stories from the original partner farms." "The Smithsonian?" Sarah repeated, astonished. "What kind of artifacts?" "Farm implements, photographs, personal items that tell the story," Alex explained. "For Jenkins Farm, they were particularly interested in something that represents the beginning of your involvement." Robert chuckled. "Not much to show from that first meeting. You got lost. I drew a map in the dirt, and it washed away with the next rain." "Maybe not the map itself," Lily suggested. "But what about Dad's old work shirt? The one with the soil stains across the front from when he knelt down to draw the directions?" "You still have that?" Alex asked, surprised. Sarah nodded. "I was going to throw it out years ago, but Robert insisted on keeping it. Said it was lucky." "It is lucky," Robert defended himself good-naturedly. "Best shirt I ever owned, considering what came from wearing it that day." As laughter rippled through the group, Robert felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. The path from struggling farmer to agricultural innovator had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led to a place of peace, security, purpose, and pride. His family's legacy was secure, their land protected, their future bright with possibilities that would have seemed like fantasy a decade ago. And it had all begun with a simple act of kindness, directions drawn in dirt for a lost traveler who turned out to be exactly the ally they needed, arriving at precisely the moment they needed her most. Some might call it coincidence, Robert thought, as he looked at the 3 women before him, his wife, his daughter, and the CEO who had changed their lives. He preferred to see it as something more meaningful, a reminder that human connections, forged in moments of genuine helpfulness, could grow into partnerships powerful enough to change not just individual lives, but entire systems. As Alex drove away with a final wave, Robert turned back to the farmhouse with Sarah and Lily. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, more visitors to educate, more innovations to explore. The work would continue, as it had for 4 generations before them, and would for generations to come. But tonight, standing on the porch of the home his great-grandfather had built, surrounded by fields that would remain in his family's care, Robert Jenkins felt something beyond the satisfaction of success or the security of prosperity. He felt the quiet joy of knowing that his life's work had meaning beyond itself, that through a chance encounter and the choices that followed, he had become part of something that would outlast him, nourishing both the land and the people connected to it long after he was gone. It was, he reflected as they went inside together, the greatest harvest a farmer could hope for. 10 years later, the auditorium at the Agricultural Sustainability Conference was filled to capacity, attendees spilling into the aisles as they waited for the keynote address to begin. On stage, an elegant woman in her 60s adjusted her notes at the podium, while a younger woman in her 30s prepared the presentation slides on a laptop. Alexandra Pierce, now retired as CEO of Freshmark but still active in agricultural policy circles, glanced at her watch and then at her co-presenter with a reassuring smile. Lily Jenkins Rodriguez, who had taken over management of Jenkins' farm 5 years earlier when her parents semi-retired, returned the smile with a confident nod. In the front row, Robert and Sarah Jenkins sat with Alex's successor at Freshmark, watching with pride as their daughter prepared to address the gathering of farmers, food industry, executives, policymakers, and students. At 62, Robert's hair had turned completely silver, and the lines on his face had deepened, but his eyes remained bright and engaged as he surveyed the crowded room. The conference moderator approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce our keynote speakers for today's session on transforming food systems, lessons from 20 years of the Rural Revival Initiative. Please welcome Alexandra Pierce, former CEO of Freshmark Grocers and founder of the initiative, and Lily Jenkins Rodriguez, second-generation partner farmer and current director of agricultural innovation at Jenkins Farm." Applause filled the auditorium as Alex and Lily took their positions at the podium. 20 years ago, Alex began, her voice strong despite her years. "A wrong turn on a country road led me to a farmer who drew directions in the dirt to help a lost stranger find her way. Neither of us could have imagined that this chance encounter would grow into a movement that would help reshape American agriculture." She gestured toward the front row. "That farmer, Robert Jenkins, and his wife Sarah are with us today. The farm they fought to save has become a model of sustainable agriculture and a training ground for the next generation of farmers. Their daughter Lily, my co-presenter today, represents that new generation, educated, innovative, and committed to building on the foundation her parents established." The audience applauded again as Robert and Sarah acknowledged the recognition with modest waves. "The Rural Revival Initiative began with a simple premise," Alex continued, "that direct partnerships between retailers and farms could create a more equitable, sustainable food system. What started with 5 farms has grown to include over 500 partners across 28 states, collectively farming more than 300,000 acres using regenerative practices." End quote. Lily stepped forward. "But this isn't just about numbers," she added. "It's about communities revitalized, families able to keep their land, consumers reconnecting with where their food comes from. It's about the high school students who visit our farm each year and discover career paths they never knew existed. It's about the climate benefits of soil carbon sequestration and reduced transportation emissions." End quote. As the presentation continued, featuring data, images, and stories from 2 decades of the initiative, Robert leaned toward Sarah. "Did you ever imagine this?" he whispered. "Our daughter up there, talking to people from all over the world about what we built together?" Sarah squeezed his hand. "Not in my wildest dreams," she admitted. "I was just hoping we wouldn't lose the farm." "I still remember how you looked when Alex first explained the initiative to us," Robert said. "Skeptical, but hopeful. Like you wanted to believe it could work but were afraid to let yourself. And you," Sarah replied with a fond smile, "were ready to sign before reading the fine print. Always the optimist." On stage, Lily was explaining the educational programs that had become a cornerstone of Jenkins Farm's operations. The farm now hosted university research projects, 4-H clubs, chef training programs, and agricultural tours for everyone from school children to international delegations. "Last year," she was saying, "we welcomed over 10,000 visitors to our learning center. Many were experiencing a working farm for the first time, seeing with their own eyes where food comes from and how it's grown. These connections matter. They change how people think about what they eat, about the true value of food, about the people who produce it." Alex rejoined her at the podium. The Rural Revival Initiative wasn't the first attempt to create more direct farm-to-retailer relationships, and it certainly won't be the last. What made it successful, I believe, was the genuine partnership at its core. We didn't impose a corporate model on resistant farmers, nor did we simply romanticize, quote, traditional agriculture. Instead, we created something new together, learning from each other and adapting as we grew. As the presentation moved toward its conclusion, focusing on the challenges ahead and lessons for other regions, Robert found his mind drifting back to that summer day 20 years ago. He could still picture Alex's Mercedes stopping beside his field, her impractical shoes sinking into the roadside soil as she crouched to watch and draw a map. He could remember the weight of worry he'd carried then, the desperate calculations each night as he tried to figure out how to keep the farm afloat for just one more season. That worry had long since lifted, replaced by new challenges that came with growth and success, but without the existential threat that had colored every decision. Jenkins' farm was now secure, not just financially, but in its purpose and legacy. Lily and her husband Miguel, an agricultural engineer she'd met during her graduate studies, were raising their 2 children on the farm, continuing the family tradition while constantly innovating and adapting. Robert and Sarah had moved to a smaller house on the property 5 years ago, leaving the main farmhouse to Lily's family, while remaining involved in day-to-day operations. Robert still worked in the fields most days, finding peace in the rhythm of growing things, while Sarah managed the farm store and developed recipes for the cookbook series that had become unexpected bestsellers. They had a good life, one that honored the past while embracing the future, that balanced hard work with meaningful purpose, that created value beyond mere profit. And it had all begun with a simple act of kindness, directions drawn in dirt for a lost traveler. On stage, Lily was concluding her portion of the presentation. "My father taught me that farming isn't just about growing crops," she said, her gaze finding Robert in the audience. "It's about cultivating relationships with the land, with our community, with the people who eat what we grow." The Rural Revival Initiative succeeded because it recognized and respected those relationships. Alex stepped forward for the final words. 20 years ago, I was a CEO looking for a better way to source produce for my stores. Robert Jenkins was a farmer trying to save his family's land. Our chance meeting could have been nothing more than a brief encounter between strangers. Instead, it became the seed of something that has helped transform how we think about food systems." End quote. She gestured toward a large screen behind her, where a photograph appeared, the striking image Lily had taken on the day of the initiative's launch, showing Alex and Robert in the tomato field, examining a Cherokee calf. Purple tomato together. The CEO in her business attire, and the farmer in his work clothes, united by their focus on the fruit in Robert's hand. "This is where change begins," Alex said, indicating the photo. "Not in boardrooms or policy papers, though those have their place, but in human connections, in recognizing our interdependence, in being willing to help a stranger find their way, or to take a chance on a new approach when the old ways aren't working." End quote. As the audience rose in a standing ovation, Robert felt Sarah's hand tighten around his. They stood together, applauding their daughter and the woman who had helped make her future possible, surrounded by people who understood and valued what they had built. Later, at the reception following the keynote, Robert found himself standing with Alex near a display of artifacts from the initiative's history. Among them was his old work shirt, preserved in a museum-quality case alongside photographs, newspaper clippings, and other memorabilia chronicling the 20-year journey. "Hard to believe that's a museum piece now," he commented, nodding toward the shirt. "Makes me feel ancient." Alex laughed. "If it helps, my original business plan for the initiative is in there too, complete with pessimistic projections from analysts who were certain it would fail within 5 years. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as attendees networked around them, connections forming that might lead to new partnerships, innovations, or solutions to the challenges still facing agriculture. "We did good, didn't we?" Robert said finally, more statement than question. "We did," Alex agreed. "More than I ever expected, though there's still so much to do." "Always is," Robert replied with the pragmatism of a farmer who knows that each harvest is both an ending and a beginning. "But we've shown it can be done. That's something." "It's everything," Alex corrected gently. Across the room, Lily was deep in conversation with a group that included the agriculture secretary, gesturing animatedly as she explained some aspect of Jenkins's farm's approach. Sarah was speaking with students interested in her farm-tutable cookbook series, signing copies they brought to the conference. The current CEO of Freshmark was being interviewed by a documentary crew about the initiative's impact on the company's approach to sustainability. All around them, the ripple effects of their partnership continued to spread, influencing policies, practices, and perspectives far beyond what either of them could have imagined that summer day when directions were drawn in dirt. "You know," Alex said thoughtfully, "in all these years, I've never properly thanked you for helping me when I was lost that day." Robert turned to her in surprise. "You thanked me 1,000 times over," he objected. "With the initiative, with everything you've done for our farm, for all the partner farms." Alex shook her head. "That wasn't gratitude. It was good business. The initiative has been as beneficial for Freshmark as it has been for the farms involved." She smiled at him. "But on a personal level, as one human being to another, thank you, Robert Jenkins, for taking the time to help a stranger find her way." Robert felt the simple words touch something deep within him, a recognition of the basic human connection that had preceded all the contracts and partnerships and programs that followed. "You're welcome, Alex," he replied with equal sincerity. "And thank you for seeing something worth saving in our little farm." As they rejoined the reception, moving among people whose lives and work had been shaped by the initiative they built together, Robert reflected that perhaps this was the most important harvest of all. Not the crops grown or the profits earned, but the connections forged, the lives improved. The future made more hopeful because two people had taken the time to help each other find their way. It had begun with directions drawn in dirt, a map that had washed away with the next rain, but it somehow guided them to exactly where they needed to be.